Well, what we're doing here is what I call semi-progressive reloading. And we're using a progressive press, but we're not actually doing everything with it at one time. Hi, this right here is the RCBS. Did that make enough noise? Thanks, good. This is the RCBS piggyback. This is a piggyback 2 that has been modified, so basically it's a piggyback 3. It's an obsolete product from RCBS, which is too bad because it's really a nifty little product. It's mounted on top of an RCBS rock chucker, but you could mount it on one of these other presses down here. Any of the presses that have these bushings in them, this 7/8 thread, and adapted out from 1 1/4 inches because it has to mount into 1 1/4 inch thread. But at any rate, it's a 5-station press. I've shown it before, but what I want to show you today is the concept of semi-progressive reloading. Let's begin our little journey by watching it go through one cycle and kind of see what's going on. Obviously, the press raises the cases up into the dies, which is the normal way of doing things. Some presses do it the other way, but you know. All right, so we do that, and then it advances forward, kicks that completed round off, and makes way for another one in this station here. And I'm right-handed. I like the setup. I can control the lever, the operating lever with my right hand, and I can insert my parts with my left hand, and I'm looking straight into this thing, so it's real easy to see what I'm doing. And I bring it up, and it puts them in there. All right, what is going on here? We have 5 stations, but if you're sharp-eyed, and I'm sure you are, you've already noticed that station number 2 doesn't have anything in it, and that's fine. Let's just go through what does happen. First of all, I'm going to tell you that we're starting with a 45 Colt cartridge that has been sized and it has been primed. So there it is. And you're saying to yourself, well, you've got that empty spot. Why up here? Why not go ahead and size them? You got a priming machine here too. Why not do that at the same time? Well, here's why. In this particular case, cartridges, the dies for cartridges, oftentimes for straight wall cartridges, are carbide dies. This is carbo. That's what they're saying here on the RCBS die. This is an older one. And that means that inside the die, there's a ring of tungsten carbide, which is very hard and very slippery. And the idea is that you can size your case up in here without lubricating it, because this stuff is so hard that it won't scratch, and it's also slippery enough that it won't grab. Well, that's true. All of that is true. But what happens is it sizes the entire case to the same amount. And certain cases, like the 45 Colt, actually have a taper to them. Now, if you size this case full length, then it's actually going to be smaller down here on this end than is absolutely required. That's not too small. It will work just fine. But what will happen is, and I'll show you with the gun, this is a Smith & Wesson Schofield reproduction, but you can see the cylinder really well. When you put that in there, this one has been sized in a regular non-carbide full-length sizing die. And as a consequence, the case, well, fits very perfectly in there. There's almost zero, well, it moves just the tiniest little bit, but when it gets down in there, you can barely feel any movement of the case inside the chamber. It's just a perfect fit. because the die that sized it is shaped like the chamber. If I did that with a carbide-sized cartridge, it would, you see how loose it is up here at this end? Well, it would be the same down here at the bottom. And so you have quite a bit of play. It works. It's not too much play. I'm probably exaggerating it a little bit. But the point is that I wanted to use a conventional sizing die, an RCBS full length, and there is no mention of carbide or anything else. And this thing is tapered on the inside so that it's smaller at the top than the bottom, and the case just fits like a glove. Well, all right, here's the big deal. To use this case, you have to lubricate the case. Well, that's fine. I don't mind doing that. But let's just suppose I had this heavily lubricated case right here. Well, by the time it comes all the way around, that lube's going to be everywhere on all the dies, and it's just a nice mess. So rather than doing that, what I did was size the case ahead of time and then drop it in a wash and clean it up real good. And then I just hand primed it with a Lee hand primer. I could have primed it right here just as well, so I actually did an extra step. But I still would size it separately, and then I would move over to this machine. I don't think there's any one spot where you can see everything well, but I'll tell you that this first die position is flaring the case, and that's because as it comes out of the sizing die, the bullet won't go into the case. It won't fit. So what we have to do is flare it so that it will. And that's what's going to happen over here in this first position. In the second position, nothing's going to happen. And in the third, we get powder. In the fourth, which you can barely see back there, is the powder checker or lockout die. And that will block us if we have too much or too little powder, specifically if we have a double charge or no charge. And then over here is the cedar and crimper combo. And on this particular cartridge, that works just fine. A lot of cartridges you have to use a separate crimping step, but not this one. So here we go. We push it down. Everything goes into place. And so now it rotates around, and that case that would not accept a bullet, in fact, a bullet will sit there, but we don't want to put it there. We want to put it right back here. And so we put another one in there, and we go again. And that's it. Now, another reason for doing it in this semi-progressive manner is that the effort required is very little, and it allows you to control everything very nicely, and it allows you to feel what's going on. If anything is wrong, you'll feel it instantly, and it's smooth. And nice thing about a cartridge like a .45 Colt, they're so big and deep, the powder doesn't have a tendency to jump out. But this thing is pretty smooth and doesn't normally do that. And so I've polished it up, and so it works very, very nicely. That's really it. It just does everything that's needed in one fell swoop. So basically you have two operations or two cycles, we'll say, of reloading. The first is where you take your case and you size it, and we'll claim we're going to prime it here, which we easily could do, or you can do what I did, and that is prime it ahead of time. By priming it ahead of time, you do eliminate one area of concern, that one more thing to have to keep up with and so forth. But it does add an extra step. So basically in 2 steps, you can create loaded ammunition that's really beautiful and clean as it comes out of the machine, because you've removed all the lube in between the sizing operation and the rest of the operations, where we flare, charge it with powder, seat the bullet, and crimp it. As I said, it's kind of of hard to see everything from any one vantage point. I'm going to block your view here, but my hand just fits perfectly right in there to drop these things into place, and I'm looking right at it. So the layout is absolutely perfect for a right-handed person. And then when it comes down, it revolves. And now you're ready for your next one. And the little kicker spring is obviously adjustable, but it's really not the least bit touchy. Let me show you about that. You use a 5/64 hex wrench and turn it lefty-loosey. You have to understand, you're actually sitting in my position where you are. So this thing's just free to rotate. And as long as you keep it out of this little recess where the die will go, you'll be in good shape. So just to show you, it's not difficult to adjust this. Put it in, put it down as low as it will go. Put your little wrench in, and then just turn it until it's almost in that area. And so now we'll put a bullet on here, and we will put a case in there. We'll run it up, and you'll see that it just kicks right out. So it's pretty straightforward. Here's the case-activated powder measure. When a case goes up inside, internally there is a plunger down inside of this die, we'll call it. And in fact, you can see the plunger right here. And the case is pushing up on it from the other end. And as it pushes the thing up, and the spring is just to make it come back, then the linkage arms actuate the powder dispenser and dump the powder down into the waiting case. This thing's not laid out for television, but what I want to show you is the case as it comes up and engages this tapered funnel-like area where the powder is going to come out, and that part is free to move internally without hitting anything until it gets right there. And then it starts hitting that extension tube from the powder measure. But at any rate, it starts lifting there, and now it dumps the powder. These bullets, by the way, are some that I made not too long ago. 230 grain, round nose, flat point, with a single large lube groove and a really nice crimping groove. Maybe you can tell from this angle the crimping groove is pretty straight and flat on top, but it's tapered in on the bottom side, allowing the case just to fold around it very nicely. And you have this big generous lube groove. It was actually developed for black powder, and I use it with that too, but I use STP, what do you call it? SPG, sorry, Mike Venturino. SPG, Steve P. Garvey, yes, lube, when I'm shooting black powder, and with this too, but I also use the blue lube because it's not as messy. The bullet was made with a mold from NOE bullet molds in Provo, Utah. And I'm telling you, these things are nice. This is a 5 cavity, and you can use those inexpensive Lee handles for their 6 cavity molds. Work perfectly with them, and it's a well-made mold. I got good bullets out of it almost immediately. They really know what they're doing. 230 grain, round, flat, 454, and I've actually sized these bullets to 454. I've also done a few at 452. I'm experimenting, trying to figure out, what's gonna work best with the Schofield. But anyway, that's what it's all about. let me show you about this powder monitoring tool, device, whatever you want to call it, back here. If you have a correct charge of powder and it's adjusted properly, then everything will work just fine. And as I will demonstrate here, I'm putting a standard powder charge in there, and now I'm going to run the cartridge up, and you see this post beginning to move, and it just comes right on up. I think you can see the little white line back there. It's kind of used for setting it up with. Okay, so everything is just hunky-dory, and it worked just fine. Now, if I take that same case, and if you'll bear with me, and I'm going to empty the powder from it, and then place it into the machine with no powder, and we'll watch this back here as it there, and that's it. It's locked out. It will not allow the case to go in because it doesn't have powder in it. Now, let's do this. Let's run it through the powder measure twice. Now we've got a double charge in there, and watch what happens. It blocked it. So either way, if you have too much or too little, then it'll stop your operation. And that's really, really important with progressive presses, to have some kind of powder monitoring system, because there's just too many things going on. Well, in a way, I've shown you everything about the machine except the machine itself, that is, by itself. And let's see if I can disassemble it to that point and show you what we're talking about. This, by the way, is the spent primer tube, and it just goes through an opening, it presses up into a recess where it gets caught. And of course, this right here is, you open it up and dump your primers into a nearby trash can. All right, let's see if I can take this thing apart. What's going to be the best tool to use here? Probably this right here. Usually I can do it like that. Got it pretty tight, but that's it. Now, what we have is a threaded nut right there. And that's what's attaching it, and then to the press. That's what links this part to this part. Down under here, you've got the ram from the press, from the rock chucker press, and then up here, you've got the ram from the piggyback unit. And in between them is this nifty little coupler, and you just simply rotate it so that you can pull it toward you, and it decouples it from the rock chucker, and that is supplied with it, of course. So now we have removed our little linkage pin part that coupled the two presses together, and down. And we've also backed off the nut here that had them tied together, so all that's left is just lift the thing off, and there it is. Of course, you normally don't do it with all the dies and everything in place. You normally take all that off. But that leaves that big opening on top, which normally has this hex bushing in there to adapt it to standard die threads. But that's all there is to it. You take the thing and you set it up on top of your press, and the easiest thing is kind of start the thing in with your fingers. If you can find there it is. You find the opening. Well, no, that's not it. Yeah, it is. That's it right there. So what I normally do is just tighten it down with my fingers. They supply a little wrench for it. But for my purposes, what's worked better, you know, obviously you can mount this thing in a number of configurations. I think ideally or originally or whatever, they intended it to be like that. But for my purposes, I like to rotate it around toward me a little bit, and then just doing that by hand gets it nice and tight and snug. And so then you bring your press up, take your little snap-in thing and get the 3 parts aligned at the same time, which is easier said than done, isn't it? And snap it in and turn it, and now you're in business. And that's it. If you could find these things, you know, honestly, they're cheap enough, you probably could pre-fit them with a bunch of different setups and just pop them on and off as an entire unit. But anyway, that's the RCBS Piggyback 3. Thank you for watching. And, well, that is all. Thanks for watching.